Today I want to discuss how we Southwestern archaeologists conceptualize the trajectory of Basketmaker people in the northern Southwest. Research over the last 30 years has vastly improved our understanding of the earliest farming groups in both the northern and southern Southwest. In the northern Southwest, we have shifted the Pecos classificatory system to account for ever increasingly earlier archaeological materials. And in the southern Southwest, we've also shifted our chronologies, but we've added the early agricultural period, which dates between 2100 BC and about 0 AD, to reflect the fact that pre-ceramic groups grew maize. We still refer to contemporary hunter-gatherer people in southern Arizona as late archaic. But getting back to the northern Southwest, it seems to me that for all intents and purposes, we perceive the development of Basketmaker in a very evolutionary framework, which severely limits our ability to study the flexibility that was necessary when people first began farming on the Colorado Plateau. And I will use examples from my recent research in the Southern Basin and Range province to identify some of these conceptual problems, and I'll recommend what I believe are meaningful solutions. Now, I don't stand before you at the Pecos conference to argue that we need to substantially change or completely dismiss the Pecos system, as some scholars have suggested. But I do argue that we need more flexibility in the system, specifically when we're talking about the earliest farming groups in the northern Southwest. And any discussion of Basketmaker must begin with the question, what constitutes the beginning of Basketmaker? So Kidder and Guernsey created the Basketmaker category to encompass the earliest people he saw on the Anasazi path. Archaeologists argue that a variety of traits contribute to a group being classified as Basketmaker. This paper is really concerned with two of those traits that I believe most, if not all, Southwestern archaeologists deem paramount to, let's call it, Basketmakerness. Those are degree of sedentism and what Kidder and his colleagues called, quote, the basic element of Southwestern cultural growth, maize, or as many modern archaeologists interpret it, a degree of reliance on agriculture. Now, I'm going to be upfront about something. I find the argument that a human group passes into a pre-ancestral Puebloan status due to achieving a certain degree of sedentism, reliance on agriculture, or cultural complexity counterproductive, specifically when it comes to the earliest farming groups in the Southwest. And I'll use some of my recent research in southern Arizona to explain why I believe this is the case. So I recently completed my MA at Northern Arizona University, where I examined the shifting habitation practices and shifting diet of early farmers at the Las Capas site. Las Capas is a large pre-ceramic agricultural village located in the Santa Cruz River floodplain in the Tucson Basin. The site contains hundreds and hundreds of pit house structures used for habitation, probably tens of thousands of storage features, and a very complex network of irrigation canals. And Las Capas residents practiced mixed agricultural foraging subsistence strategy. There are three well-dated floodplain strata that represent the core of the site's occupation during the San Pedro phase, which is what I will be discussing. And San Pedro phase dates between 1200 and 800 BC. Each stratum contains the same set of features, indicating that the same activities took place at the site over the extent of the San Pedro phase. The earliest stratum dates between 1200 and 1000 BC, and it provided ideal conditions for agriculturalists. And people were relatively sedentary during this time period and very reliant on maize. Nearly 85% of the features tested contain maize during this interval. The next stratum dates between approximately 1000 and 950 BC. During this interval, large-scale flood events and shifting climate limited agricultural productivity, and in response, people increased residential mobility, and there's a severe drop-off in the ubiquity of maize in features during this time period. The most recent stratum I'm concerned with dates between approximately 950 and 800 BC, which once again provided ideal conditions for farmers. Sedentism again increases substantially, and nearly 90% of the features contain maize during this interval. So the Las Capas site, to me, represents a proven case where you have a pretty sedentary community who are very reliant on agriculture, shift their habitation practices, and resource procurement strategies directly in response to climate, only to return to an even more sedentary and, relying on agricultural lifestyle immediately when climate permits them to do so. And I firmly believe that maintaining a degree of flexibility was paramount to the survival and longevity of early farmers during this time period in a marginal environment, and particularly prior to the introduction of more productive varieties of maize into the Southwest. So my question is, how do we account for a human group becoming more or less sedentary and more or less reliant on agriculture using the Pecos system in the northern Southwest? Can we have a human group move between, say, Basketmaker 2 and late Archaic? And this brings me to my next point. No matter what model you subscribe to when it comes to introduction of maize into the northern Southwest, and let's just use Madsen's model of an archaic group adopting agriculture in the eastern Basketmaker region, and you have a migration of southern farmers to the north in the western Basketmaker region. In both of these scenarios, you have a period of time where there are hunter-gatherer groups and agricultural groups that are interacting with each other in the same areas. And again, there is evidence supporting that this was taking place during the early agricultural period in southern Arizona. The Tucson Basin has a bimodal site distribution during the early agricultural period. There are large habitation sites located in the floodplain and smaller resource procurement and campsites located in the uplands in the Bajada. And archaeologists have interpreted this bimodal site distribution in a number of ways. Some argue that mainly floodplain dwelling agriculturalists are using resources in the uplands, and others have argued that you have a mix of hunter-gatherer groups and agricultural groups occupying the Tucson Basin at the same time. There's one particular site which I'd like to discuss briefly. It's called the Coffee Camp site. Dates to approximately 400 BC, and I think it, for all intents and purposes, is an archaic habitation site. The site contains no evidence of maize, no pollen, no macro remains, even though there are a slew of habitation features there that have many of which were tested for macro remains. And this site was occupied at a time period where you had a minimum of 600 years of agriculturalists aggregating in floodplains in these large farming villages. So the next question I would like to pose for the northern Southwest is, does the Pecos system allow for these interactions to take place between early farmers and hunter-gatherer groups? Well, I would like to argue that it is possible for the Pecos system to account for these both shifting habitation practices and shifting reliance on agriculture and interactions between early agriculturalists and hunter-gatherer groups. But I think we need to work together to make the system a little bit more flexible. So how do we make this happen? I believe that instituting the changes that Madsen advocated in 2006 by filling the empty Basketmaker 1 or Basketmaker Void, which Kidder and his colleagues purposefully and thoughtfully left open at this very conference 87 years ago to account for these pre-Basketmaker 2 farming groups we now know are present all across the Colorado Plateau would be a very important first step. I mean, we just had Heidi Roberts come up here yesterday and talk about pre-1000 maize out of slab-lined pit structures near Canal. I think it's time for us to start viewing these sorts of sites as an anomaly and start incorporating them into the trajectory of Basketmaker people on the Colorado Plateau. So we need both. I think the thing is that we need to move forward with a degree of understanding that flexibility remain key to the survival of, now I'm going to say it, Basketmaker 1 groups. Yay! Actually felt kind of nice. In addition, we need to acknowledge that early Basketmaker groups interacted with hunter-gatherer groups, and this requires the flexibility to call contemporary people late Archaic and Basketmaker. I firmly believe that these changes will allow archaeologists to explore the habitation practices and resource procurement strategies of the earliest farmers in the northern Southwest in a more nuanced fashion. Thank you.